My name is Yetta, and I'm 32 years old. For 12 years, I believed in love and marriage. I built what I thought was a stable life, a partnership based on trust. I managed finances, made smart decisions, and helped grow a family business into something remarkable. But there's a funny thing about trust. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones plotting your downfall. The day I discovered the truth changed everything. See, most people think money is power, but they forget that sometimes the quiet one, the one they overlook, is actually holding all the cards. Before I share what happened, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how 7 people learned this lesson the hard way. I met Kyle when I was working as an accountant at a financial consulting firm. He was a sales manager, charming and confident in a way that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We dated for 3 years before getting married, and honestly, those early years were good. We laughed together, dreamed together, built a life together. 10 years ago, Kyle's parents, Arthur and Linda, decided to retire early. They owned a chain of high-end home goods stores, 5 locations spread across 3 states in the Pacific Northwest. The business was successful, profitable, and had a solid reputation. But Arthur knew his son. He knew Kyle was brilliant at sales and relationships, but terrible with numbers and long-term planning. So when they handed over the company, Arthur made one condition. He asked me to become the chief financial officer. I remember that conversation clearly. Arthur sat across from me and his study hands folded on the desk. He said, "Yetta, my son is great at making people love our brand, but he'll run this company into the ground in 2 years if someone doesn't watch the money. You're the smartest financial mind I've ever met. Will you do this?" It was a huge ask. I'd have to leave my job, take on enormous responsibility, and step into a family business with all its complications. But I believed in Kyle. I believed in us. So I said yes. Those first few years were intense. I restructured our accounting systems, renegotiated supplier contracts, and implemented inventory management software that cut waste by 23%. I reviewed every major purchase, every expansion plan, every investment. Arthur had made sure I had real authority. I was the one who signed off on all significant transactions. Without my signature, money didn't move. The business grew. Over 8 years, we expanded from 5 stores to 9. Revenue tripled. We hired 140 new employees. Industry magazines wrote articles about our success. And through it all, I was the one making sure the numbers worked, that we didn't overextend, that growth was sustainable. But running the business meant dealing with Kyle's family. And Kyle's family was a whole ecosystem of dependents. There was Arthur, now 71, officially retired, but still offering opinions. Linda, 68, who loved the status of being the matriarch of a successful business family. Then there was Nora, Kyle's older sister. She was 38, divorced 3 years ago, and had been living off company dividends and a generous monthly allowance ever since. She worked part-time at one of our stores, but mostly spent her days shopping and complaining about her ex-husband. Grant, Kyle's younger brother, was 29. He managed one of our locations, and he was decent at it, but his real talent was spending money. New car every 2 years, expensive clothes, elaborate vacations. All funded by his salary, which was frankly too high for his actual contribution. Then there were the extended family members. Aunt Judith, Arthur's sister, was 60 years old and had been widowed 5 years earlier. Kyle had immediately put her on the company payroll as a consultant, though she consulted on absolutely nothing. She received $4,000 a month just for existing. Uncle Raymond, Linda's brother, was 55 and hadn't held a steady job in a decade. Kyle gave him a role as regional advisor, which meant he drove around visiting stores, gave unhelpful suggestions, and collected $60,000 a year. All 6 of these people depended on the company. More specifically, they depended on me keeping the company profitable, so their checks kept coming. At first, they respected me. Arthur would brag to his friends about his daughter-in-law, the financial genius. Linda would introduce me at charity events as the brains behind the operation. Even Nora, who I sensed never really liked me, would grudgingly admit I knew what I was doing. But there was always an undercurrent. Comments about my background. I grew up middle-class daughter of a teacher and a nurse. I didn't summer in the Hamptons or attend private schools. I wore clothes from department stores, not designer boutiques. And while I learned to navigate their world, I never quite fit the mold of what they thought a successful CEO's wife should be. The dynamic shifted 2 years ago when I found out I couldn't have children. We'd been trying for a year with no success. After multiple doctor visits and tests, I learned I had severe endometriosis that had caused irreversible damage. Natural pregnancy wasn't possible. I was devastated. Kyle held me while I cried and told me it didn't matter. He said we could adopt, or we could just be happy together, the two of us. He seemed so understanding, so supportive. Looking back, I think that's when everything changed. That's when I stopped being the brilliant daughter-in-law who saved the family business and became the defective wife who couldn't provide an heir. Linda started making comments. Nothing direct at first, just observations about how wonderful it must be to have grandchildren spoken loudly whenever we visited. Nora would talk about her friends' babies with exaggerated enthusiasm, always glancing at me to see if I'd react. But Kyle seemed different too. He started working late more often. Business trips became longer and more frequent. When he was home, he was distracted, always on his phone, smiling at messages he never shared. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriage goes through phases. He was stressed about work. I was projecting my own pain about infertility onto our relationship. I kept managing the business, kept making sure everyone got their paychecks, kept being the reliable Yetta who made everything work. What I didn't know was that while I was holding everything together, they were all planning how to tear me apart. The signs started small, easy to dismiss if you wanted to believe everything was fine. And I desperately wanted to believe everything was fine. 6 months before everything fell apart, I noticed Kyle's habits changing. He'd always been social, always texting friends and colleagues. But this was different. He'd be sitting across from me at dinner and his phone would buzz. He'd glance at it, and this smile would spread across his face. Not the smile he gave me. Something softer, more private. When I asked who he was texting, he'd say it was just a colleague discussing a new supplier or a marketing campaign. Reasonable answers. Nothing I could argue with. Then there were the purchases. I handled our personal finances as well as the business accounts, and I started seeing charges I didn't recognize. A piece of jewelry from Tiffany's for $1,800. A bottle of perfume, $350, a brand I'd never worn. Designer handbags. I asked Kyle about them. He barely looked up from his laptop. Oh, those client gifts. We're trying to land some major accounts. You know how it is. Got to impress people. It made sense. Sort of. Except we'd never spent that much on client gifts before, and I didn't recognize the client names when I checked our business development reports. Linda's comments became sharper. She stopped by our house one Sunday afternoon, ostensibly to drop off some books she thought I'd enjoy. As she was leaving, she paused in the doorway and said, "You know, Yetta family legacy is so important to Arthur and me. We always imagined our grandchildren would inherit the business someday. It's such a shame when that dream becomes impossible." The words hit like a slap. I managed to smile and nod, but after she left, I sat on the couch for an hour staring at nothing. Nora was less subtle. At a family dinner 3 months before the trip, she was talking about her friend Melissa, who apparently had just gotten engaged to a wealthy developer. "And Melissa's already talking about starting a family right away," Nora said, her voice bright and deliberately cheerful. "Some women are just so lucky to have that option. They can give their husbands everything they need." She looked directly at me when she said it. Grant just stared at his plate, uncomfortable but silent. But the real warning came 2 months before they left. I was working late at the office finishing quarterly reports. Kyle had said he was meeting with a potential investor for dinner and would be home around 10. I decided to surprise him by stopping by the restaurant to say hello. The restaurant was an upscale Italian place downtown, dim lighting and private booths. I spotted Kyle immediately. He was in a corner booth leaning across the table, holding hands with a woman I'd never seen before. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with long dark hair and the kind of effortless beauty that comes from expensive skincare and professional styling. She was laughing at something Kyle said, and he was looking at her the way he used to look at me. I stood there frozen until a waiter asked if I needed a table. The sound of his voice snapped me out of it. I left before Kyle saw me. When he came home that night, I was waiting in the living room. Who was she? I asked. He didn't even have the decency to look guilty. Just confused. Who was who? The woman you were having dinner with. At Marcello's. His face shifted annoyance, replacing confusion. Were you following me? I was trying to surprise you. Answer the question. That's Angela Chen, our new marketing associate. We were discussing the spring campaign. I checked our employee records the next day. We had no one named Angela Chen. No new marketing associates at all. When I confronted him again, he exploded. This is exactly why our marriage is falling apart, Yetta. You're suffocating me. You track every dollar I spend, question everyone I meet, treat me like I'm some kind of criminal. Maybe if you focused less on controlling everything and more on being a wife, we wouldn't have these problems. It was the first time he'd ever yelled at me like that. I was so shocked I actually apologized. A month before the trip, I overheard Grant talking on his phone. I'd stopped by one of our stores to check inventory, and he was in the back office. The door was slightly open. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but his voice carried. It's almost time, he was saying. Just a few more months and everything changes. Yeah, she has no idea. Dad says we just have to be patient. When I walked in, he jumped and quickly ended the call. I asked what he meant by almost time. His face went red and he stammered something about a surprise party for Linda's birthday. It was a terrible lie. Linda's birthday was in March, 8 months away. That's when I made the decision to hire a private investigator. I felt guilty about it, like I was betraying my marriage. But something was very wrong and I needed to know what. I found Monica Chen through a referral from a friend who'd gone through a messy divorce. Monica was in her 40s, a former police detective who now ran a small investigation firm. She was direct, professional, and expensive. I met her at a coffee shop far from our neighborhood. I showed her photos of Kyle, gave her his schedule, explained my concerns. She listened without judgment and said she'd have preliminary information in a week. 6 days later, she sent me an encrypted file. I opened it in my car, parked in an empty lot, hands shaking. The file contained photos. Kyle entering an apartment building downtown. Kyle leaving the same building the next morning. Kyle having brunch with the same young woman from the restaurant. Kyle at a jewelry store purchasing a diamond bracelet. And then the photograph that made my blood run cold. Kyle with his hand on the young woman's stomach. Her stomach, which was visibly rounded with pregnancy. Monica's report was thorough. The woman's name was Sienna Hayes, 26 years old. She was a part-time model and social media influencer with 73,000 followers. She'd met Kyle at a charity gala 14 months ago. They'd been seeing each other for over a year. She was 7 months pregnant. The apartment was a luxury 2-bedroom Kyle had leased 6 months ago. Rent was $4,300 a month. The jewelry, the clothes, the trips to expensive restaurants, all for her. Total expenditure over the past year, approximately $287,000. And here was the part that made me feel physically sick. Monica had managed to get information from someone who worked in Arthur and Linda's building. The whole family knew. They'd known for months. There had been multiple family meetings to discuss the situation. I sat in my car and read that report 3 times. Then I drove home, went to our bedroom, and methodically packed a suitcase. I was leaving. I was done. But then my phone rang. It was Arthur. Yetta, he said, his voice warm and paternal like always. I wanted to talk to you about something. Can you come by the house tomorrow? Something in his tone stopped me from hanging up. I said yes. The next day I went to Arthur and Linda's house. The whole family was there. Kyle, Nora Grant, Judith Raymond. They were all in the living room, and the atmosphere was strange. Excited, almost giddy. Linda hugged me, which she rarely did. Yetta, darling, we have some news. My mother has been having some health issues. Nothing too serious, but the doctors think she should see a specialist in Switzerland. We've decided to all go together as a family to support her. I looked at Kyle. He met my eyes without flinching. I thought you'd want to stay here and keep the business running, he said. You're so good at that. We'll be gone maybe 6 to 8 weeks. It's a lot to ask, but you're the only one we trust. Why Switzerland? I asked. Arthur stepped in smoothly. The best cardiac specialists in the world are there. Linda needs the absolute best care. I looked around the room. They were all watching me, waiting. Nora smiled. We know it's a big sacrifice leaving you here alone, but you understand how important family is. I understood perfectly. I just wasn't the family they were talking about. I told them I'd handle everything while they were gone. Kyle kissed my cheek and said I was the best wife anyone could ask for. Linda squeezed my hand and thanked me for being so understanding. I went home and called Monica. I need everything you can get me in 72 hours. Bank records, emails, text messages, everything. Then I called a lawyer. Diane Kruger's office was in a steel and glass building downtown 30th floor with a view that stretched to the mountains. She was in her 50s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and a reputation for winning impossible cases. She'd made her name representing women in high-asset divorces, and her fee was $600 an hour. Worth every cent. I showed her everything. Monica's investigation report. The bank statements showing Kyle funneling money to Sienna. Screenshots Monica had obtained of text messages between Kyle and his mother discussing how to handle me after the baby was born. Photographs of the pregnancy. Diane read through it all, her expression neutral. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "You have more than enough for a divorce. But I assume you want more than that." I want everything, I said. I want the company, the house, every asset we share. And I want them to understand what they threw away. Diane's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then we need to be strategic. If you file for divorce while they're here, they'll freeze assets, hide money, make this messy. But if you wait until they're gone, until they're comfortable and far away, you can act decisively. What do you mean? She leaned forward. You're the CFO. You control the money. Every account, every credit card, every expense report. Right now, they think you're a dutiful wife who'll keep the machine running while they celebrate their new heir. Use that. Let them leave. Let them think they've won. And then pull the rug out from under them. Is that legal? Diane pulled out a thick folder. This is the corporate structure Arthur set up 10 years ago when you took over as CFO. Let's review your actual powers. We spent 3 hours going through documents. Arthur had been more thorough than I'd realized. As CFO, I had unilateral authority to freeze accounts if I suspected fraud or misuse of company funds. I had the right to suspend expense privileges pending investigation. And most importantly, because of the estate planning Arthur had done 5 years ago, I was a 50% owner of the company. Not Kyle. Me. Arthur had done it to protect the business in case something happened to Kyle. He'd told me about it at the time, saying it was just a formality, a way to ensure continuity of management. I'd signed the papers and barely thought about it since, but it meant I didn't need Kyle's permission for anything. I could run the company entirely on my own. Diane helped me draft a plan. The moment they left the country, I'd initiate an internal investigation into misuse of company funds. I had documentation of Kyle spending $287,000 on Sienna, all charged to various company accounts and credit cards. That was embezzlement, clear and simple. I'd freeze all company accounts linked to Kyle and the 6 family members. Their corporate credit cards, their expense accounts, their monthly allowances, everything. Simultaneously, I'd file for divorce with evidence of adultery and financial fraud. It was aggressive. It was ruthless. It was exactly what they'd do to me if our positions were reversed. The day before they left, Kyle came home with luggage. He was excited talking about the 5-star hotel they'd booked in Geneva, the restaurants he wanted to try. He showed me pictures on his phone of Lake Geneva and the Alps. "Sienna's coming too," he said casually. She's been stressed with the pregnancy and Mom thought the trip would be good for her. She'll give birth in a Swiss hospital. They have the best maternity care. So they weren't even pretending Linda was sick. They were celebrating. A family vacation to welcome Kyle's child with his mistress. How nice, I said. I hope you all have a wonderful time. He hugged me. Thank you for being so understanding. I know this is hard, but you're amazing. When I get back, we should talk about our future. Maybe we can work something out. I knew what he meant. Divorce, but on their terms. Maybe a small settlement to keep me quiet. Definitely losing the company I'd built. They'd probably let me walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else as long as I didn't make trouble. The morning they left, I drove Kyle to the airport. Arthur, Linda, Nora, Grant, Judith, and Raymond were all there along with Sienna. She was very pregnant, very young, and very aware of her position. She looked at me with something between pity and triumph. Linda hugged me. Take care of yourself, Yetta. We'll miss you. I watched them go through security. Kyle waved one last time. I got in my car, drove to my lawyer's office, and said, "Let's do it." The first thing I did was call an emergency board meeting. Arthur had appointed 3 independent board members 5 years ago as part of restructuring the company's governance. They were professionals, not family, and they took their fiduciary duty seriously. I presented them with evidence. Bank records showing Kyle had transferred company funds to his personal account, then to Sienna's account. Credit card statements with charges at jewelry stores, luxury boutiques, and a high-end baby furniture store, all marked as business expenses. Lease agreements for Sienna's apartment paid through our corporate housing allowance program. The total misappropriation was $347,000 over 18 months. The board members looked at the documents in silence. Finally, Thomas, a retired banking executive, spoke. "This is serious. This could be criminal." "I know," I said. "Which is why I'm requesting authorization to freeze all accounts pending a full forensic investigation. We need to stop any further bleeding immediately." They voted unanimously to grant me emergency financial authority. As of that moment, I had sole control over every dollar in every company account. I spent the next 6 hours on the phone with our bank, our credit card companies, and our payment processors. Every corporate card was canceled. Every expense account was frozen. Every automatic transfer was stopped. Then I went to our corporate accounts and made changes. Kyle, Arthur, Linda, Nora, Grant, Judith, and Raymond all had access to various accounts for legitimate business purposes. I revoked every single access credential, changed every password, set up 2-factor authentication tied only to my phone. By midnight, they had no access to company money. None of them could withdraw a dollar charge a meal or transfer funds. The next morning, I filed for divorce. Diane submitted a petition to the court requesting an immediate freeze on all marital assets pending litigation. Given the evidence of adultery and financial fraud, the judge granted it within 4 hours. Every joint account Kyle and I had was frozen. The house, which was in my name because I'd purchased it with inheritance money from my parents, remained mine, but Kyle's access was revoked. His personal credit cards, which were linked to our joint accounts, stopped working. Then I sent formal letters to each of the 6 family members. The letters informed them that due to an ongoing investigation into financial irregularities, all discretionary company payments, including salaries not tied to actual work performed, were suspended effective immediately. Nora's monthly allowance of $7,000 stopped. Grant's inflated salary reduced to market rate for a store manager about half what he'd been making. Judith's consulting fee eliminated. Raymond's regional advisor salary gone. Even Arthur and Linda's generous retirement disbursements were put on hold. I was perfectly within my rights. The company was hemorrhaging money due to fraud. Any responsible CFO would cut unnecessary expenses during an investigation. I changed all the locks on our house. I changed my phone number. I set up an auto response to any emails from Kyle or his family directing them to contact my attorney. Then I waited. They'd been in Geneva for 3 days when Kyle tried to use his credit card at dinner. I wasn't there, obviously, but Monica had a contact at the credit card company who told us what happened. The card was declined. Kyle tried another card. Declined. He asked Sienna to try hers. Also declined, because her cards were supplementary cards on Kyle's account. According to Monica's source, Kyle had to excuse himself from the table and call the credit card company from the restaurant bathroom. That's when he found out the account was frozen. He tried calling me 11 times that night. I didn't answer. Every call went to voicemail. He left messages. The first few were confused. "Babe, something's wrong with the cards. Can you check on it?" Then concerned. "Yetta, please call me back. We're having issues and I need your help." Then angry. "What the hell is going on? Call me now." I listened to each voicemail once, saved them for my lawyer, and deleted them. The next day, Arthur tried to access the main company account to wire himself money. He discovered he'd been locked out. He called our bank. They told him that due to an internal investigation, only the CFO, myself, could authorize transactions. He called me. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message, just hung up and tried again. And again. 15 calls. I was at my desk working through financial reports while my phone buzzed with their increasingly frantic attempts to reach me. On day 5, Arthur managed to get through by calling my office line. My assistant, who didn't know what was happening, put the call through. Yetta Arthur's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "What is going on? Why are the accounts frozen? There's an investigation into misuse of company funds," I said calmly. "I've brought in forensic accountants. Until we determine the extent of the fraud, all non-essential expenses are suspended." "Fraud? What fraud?" "Yetta, this is absurd. Unfreeze those accounts immediately." "I'm afraid I can't do that. The board has authorized me to take all necessary measures to protect the company's assets. If you'd like to discuss this further, please contact my attorney. Her information is in the email I sent you. Your attorney." "Yetta, what are you talking about? I've filed for divorce, Arthur. Kyle will be receiving the papers soon. I'm sure you'll understand why I can't discuss this with you directly." I hung up. According to Monica, who was paying a hotel employee in Geneva for updates, chaos erupted. The family had booked a suite of rooms at a 5-star hotel on Lake Geneva. They'd prepaid for 1 week, but they'd planned to stay for 6 to 8 weeks. The hotel required payment for the second week. None of their cards worked. They tried to pool their cash. Between 7 people, they had about $4,000 in various currencies. Not nearly enough. Sienna, 8 months pregnant, started crying. She wanted to go home. She'd signed up for a luxurious European baby moon, not whatever disaster this was turning into. Kyle tried to wire money from his personal accounts to the hotel. But his personal accounts were also frozen because of the divorce filing. Nora attempted to book return flights. 7 first-class tickets from Geneva to Seattle cost over $38,000. They didn't have it. Grant called everyone he knew begging for loans. Most of his friends were wealthy, but nobody loans that kind of money instantly, especially for someone who can't explain why he's suddenly broke in Switzerland. On day 7, the hotel asked them to leave. They'd already extended a courtesy day, but they needed paying guests. The family moved to a budget hostel on the outskirts of Geneva. 7 people, including 1 very pregnant woman, sharing 3 small rooms with bunk beds and a shared bathroom down the hall. Linda, who hadn't stayed anywhere without 5-star service in 20 years, had a breakdown. According to the hotel employee Monica bribed, Linda sat in the hostel common room and cried for 2 hours. Arthur tried to stay dignified, but he was furious. He sent me an email threatening legal action. I forwarded it to Diane, who sent him a cease and desist letter, along with copies of the evidence of Kyle's embezzlement. Arthur didn't email again. Judith called me from a borrowed phone begging, "Yetta, please, this is inhumane. Sienna could go into labor any day. She needs proper medical care." "Then you should come home," I said. "We don't have money for tickets." "That sounds like poor planning. Have you considered getting jobs?" I hung up. On day 9, Sienna started having contractions. They were false labor, but she was terrified. The hostel owner called an ambulance. The Swiss medical system examined her, determined she was fine, and released her. The bill was $1,800. They couldn't pay it. Kyle sent me an email, the subject line just "please" in all capitals. The email said, "Yetta, I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. I deserve everything you're doing to me. But Sienna hasn't done anything wrong. She's scared and pregnant and in a foreign country. Please, just enough money to get her home safely and proper medical care. I'm begging you." I wrote back, "The woman you got pregnant while we were married hasn't done anything wrong. Interesting perspective. As for money, I suggest you contact your family for help." Oh wait, they're all with you. How unfortunate. They stayed in Geneva for 3.5 weeks total. They sold everything they'd brought that had any value. Watches, jewelry, designer clothes, electronics. They scraped together enough money for 7 economy tickets home. Not direct flights. They had layovers in London and New York, turning a 12-hour trip into nearly 30 hours of travel. Monica's contact at the airport sent photos. 7 exhausted, humiliated people trudging through Geneva Airport. Sienna in a wheelchair, swollen and miserable. Linda crying. Arthur's face set in fury. Kyle looking like he'd aged 10 years. They landed in Seattle on a Tuesday afternoon. I know because Kyle called me from the airport. I answered this time. "Yetta, please, we need to talk." "Go ahead and talk." "Not on the phone." "Can I come to the house?" "No. The locks are changed. You don't live there anymore." "Where am I supposed to go?" "There are shelters, hotels." "Not my concern. Please." He was crying. "I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Just let me explain in person. You had an affair. You got another woman pregnant. You stole from the company to support her. You took your entire family on a vacation to celebrate your mistress having your baby. What exactly is left to explain? Silence. Then I love you. No, you don't. You love what I could do for you. There's a difference. I hung up. They took a taxi from the airport to our house. My house. I watched them arrive on the security camera. 7 people climbing out of 2 taxis looking defeated. Kyle rang the doorbell. I walked to the door but didn't open it. I spoke through the intercom. "What do you want?" "Can we please come in? We need to talk." I opened the door but didn't invite them in. I stood in the doorway looking at the 7 people who'd planned to destroy me. Kyle looked horrible. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed. "Please, Yetta, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you and your entire family plan to use me, then throw me away." Nora pushed forward. "You can't just lock us out." "We have rights." I smiled. "Rights. Let's talk about rights. This house is in my name. I bought it with my inheritance from my parents. You have exactly 0 rights here." Linda's voice shook. "We need a place to stay. Sienna is about to give birth. This is inhumane." I looked at Linda. "You know what's inhumane? Calling your daughter-in-law defective because she can't have children. Plotting to steal the company she built. Laughing about how she'll keep working while you celebrate replacing her." Linda paled. Arthur stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Yetta, let's be reasonable. We can work this out. Come to an arrangement. I'm glad you want to be reasonable. Here are my terms." Kyle signs the divorce papers and gives up all claim to the company. The rest of you resign from any positions in the company immediately. In return, I won't press criminal charges for embezzlement. Grant looked panicked. Embezzlement? It didn't steal anything. Kyle used $347,000 of company money for personal expenses. That's a felony. I have documentation of every transaction. Bank records, credit card statements, receipts. I pulled out my phone and started reading. September 15th, $2,000 charged to company card at Cartier. September 23rd, $4,300 wire transfer from corporate account to Sienna Hayes. October 2nd. "Stop," Kyle said. "Just stop." Raymond, who'd been silent, spoke up. "Where are we supposed to go?" I looked at him. "You're 55 years old and you haven't worked a real job in a decade. Maybe it's time to start. I hear that hostel in Geneva has availability." I closed the door and locked it. Through the security camera, I watched them stand there for a long moment. Then Sienna sat down on the front steps and started sobbing. Emma sat down next to her, put her arm around her shoulders. They eventually called another taxi. I later learned they went to a motel near the airport, the kind that charges by the week and doesn't ask questions. 3 days later, Kyle came to my lawyer's office. He signed the divorce papers. He gave up all claim to the company, to our house, to everything. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges. The divorce terms were brutal. He got to keep his personal clothes, his car, which still had 2 years of payments left, and $5,000. That was it. Everything else mine. Sienna gave birth 4 days later at a county hospital. A boy, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. She named him Tyler. Kyle was there, but barely. He couldn't afford the private room. She'd wanted the specialized doctors, the luxury recovery suite. According to mutual acquaintances, Sienna left him 3 weeks after giving birth. She moved back in with her parents in California, taking Tyler with her. Kyle sees his son 1 weekend a month when he can afford the plane ticket. 1 month after the divorce was finalized, I stood in the conference room of what was now my company. The board of directors sat around the table. I'd called them together to discuss restructuring. First order of business, I need to make some personnel changes. I explained that Grant would be let go. His position would be filled by someone with actual retail management experience and a proven track record. Nora had already quit, knowing she was about to be fired. Arthur and Linda's retirement payments would resume, but at a significantly reduced rate. Enough to live comfortably, yet not lavishly. Judith and Raymond were a different story. I called them into my office separately. Judith came first. She was nervous, wringing her hands. Yetta. I know you're angry. I should have told you what they were planning. I'm sorry. You should be. But you're also Arthur's sister, and despite everything, I'm not cruel. I'm offering you a choice. You can accept a small monthly payment, $1,500, to help with basic expenses. In exchange, you'll sign a document acknowledging that you knew about Kyle's affair and his misuse of company funds but didn't inform me. Or you can refuse and get nothing. She took the deal. Raymond got the same offer. He took it too. Then I met with Arthur and Linda. They came to my office looking older than I'd ever seen them. Linda's hands trembled. Arthur's usual confidence was gone. Sit down, I said. They sat. I want you to understand something. I could destroy you completely. I have evidence that you knew about Kyle's embezzlement. As board members, you had a fiduciary duty to report it. You didn't. That makes you complicit. I could sue you personally for breach of fiduciary duty. You could lose your retirement, your house, everything. Linda started crying. Please don't. I'm not going to. You want to know why? They both looked at me. Because I'm not you. I don't destroy people out of spite or greed. But you will live with some consequences. Your retirement payments are cut by 60%. You'll have enough to maintain your house and basic lifestyle, but no more luxury vacations, no more country club memberships, no more spending $10,000 on a dinner party. Arthur's jaw clenched. That's punitive. No, that's fair. You enabled your son to betray me. You participated in planning my humiliation. And you spent years taking for granted the person who made your comfortable retirement possible. This is you experiencing accountability. I leaned back. But here's what else is going to happen. You're both going to apologize to me. Genuinely. You're going to acknowledge what you did. And you're going to mean it. If you do that, we can move forward with basic civility. If you don't, I'll cut you off entirely and let you figure out how to survive on Social Security. Linda spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Yetta. I was cruel. I said terrible things about you not being able to have children. I made you feel less than human. I pushed Kyle towards Sienna because I wanted a grandchild so badly I forgot basic decency. What I did was unforgivable, and I know that. I'm so sorry. Arthur took longer. Finally, he said I should have stopped them. When Linda and Nora started talking about Sienna, about the baby, about pushing you out, I should have put my foot down. I should have remembered that you saved this company. You made it what it is. Instead, I went along with a plan that was cruel and short-sighted. I failed you, and I failed the values I claim to hold. I'm ashamed. I looked at them both. Thank you. I don't forgive you, not yet. Maybe not ever. But I appreciate that you're taking responsibility. Over the next few weeks, each of them came to my office. Judith apologized for standing by silently. Raymond apologized for benefiting from the situation without questioning it. Nora apologized stiffly. Still bitter but smart enough to know she had no leverage. Grant apologized and asked if there was any way he could keep his job. I said no. Kyle came last. I made him wait 3 hours in the reception area before I'd see him. When he finally came into my office, he looked broken. Working at a big-box retail store trying to scrape together child support payments, living in a studio apartment in a bad part of town. He sat down across from me. I destroyed the best thing in my life. You were brilliant and loyal, and you loved me when I didn't deserve it. I threw it away for someone I barely knew for a fantasy because I was weak and selfish. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. And I understand that I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I had something real and I destroyed it. I sat quietly for a moment. Then I said, "Do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't the affair. People make mistakes, relationships fall apart. It was that you were willing to steal from a company we built together to betray someone who had only ever supported you because you wanted something new and shiny. You reduced 12 years of partnership to nothing. That's what I can't forgive." I know. He wiped his eyes. For what it's worth, Sienna left me. She took Tyler back to California. I see him one weekend a month when I can afford it. Everything I thought I wanted gone. All I have is regret. I'm sorry it worked out that way for Tyler. Every child deserves better than to be a pawn in adult mistakes. Kyle nodded and stood to leave. At the door he paused. Are you happy, Yetta? I hope you are. You deserve it. After he left, I sat at my desk for a long time thinking about his question. Was I happy? 2 years later, I could finally answer yes. The company thrived. Under my leadership, revenue increased by 41%. We opened 3 new stores. I hired smart, capable people who earned their positions through talent, not family connections. Industry publications called me one of the most successful turnaround CEOs in the retail sector. But business success wasn't what made me happy. 6 months after the divorce, I met Ethan at a fundraiser for childhood literacy. He was an architect, 40 years old, divorced with a 10-year-old daughter named Casey. He was kind, thoughtful, and had no interest in my money. He liked that I was successful, that he loved me for who I was. The real me, not the version of myself I'd spent years performing for people who never appreciated it. We dated for a year before getting engaged. His daughter and I bonded over a shared love of science fiction and baking. She asked if she could call me Yetta Mom. I cried when she said it. I also decided to adopt. I'd spent so long defining myself by what I couldn't do that I'd forgotten to think about what I could do. Through the foster system, I met Sophie, a 5-year-old girl who'd been in 3 different homes. She was quiet, wary, and brilliant. We connected immediately. The adoption process took 11 months. The day it was finalized, Sophie looked at me and said, "Am I really yours forever?" Forever, I promised. Ethan Casey. Sophie and I became a family. Not the family anyone had planned for me, but the one I chose. The one that chose me back. I still ran the company. I still worked hard, made smart decisions, grew the business. But it wasn't my whole identity anymore. I saw Kyle one more time about 18 months after everything ended. I was at a grocery store shopping for ingredients for Sophie's birthday cake. I turned down the cereal aisle and nearly ran into him. He was pushing a cart with Tyler in the seat. The boy was almost too chubby-cheeked and curious. Kyle looked tired, but sober, dressed in the polo shirt of the electronics store where he worked. We stared at each other for a moment. Then Kyle said, "Hello, Yetta." "Hello, Kyle." I looked at Tyler. "He's beautiful." "Thank you." Kyle's voice was soft. "How have you been?" "Good. Really good, actually. You getting by?" "It's hard, but I'm managing." Tyler keeps me going. I'm glad. I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want him to suffer forever. I just wanted him to understand consequences. Kyle hesitated, then said, "I heard you got engaged." "To an architect, yes." "Ethan. He's wonderful." "That's good. You deserve wonderful." He paused. "I also heard you adopted a little girl. Sophie. She's 5. Smart as a whip and sweet as can be. I'm happy for you, Yetta. Truly, thank you. I hope things get better for you, Kyle. I hope you find peace." He nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Take care of yourself. You too." We went our separate ways, pushing our carts in opposite directions. And I realized, standing there in the grocery store, that I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no satisfaction in his struggling. Just a quiet neutrality, like he was someone I used to know. That night, Ethan and I made dinner together while Sophie and Casey set the table. We talked about our days, laughed at Casey's story about her science teacher, listened to Sophie practice the new song she'd learned in music class. After the girls went to bed, Ethan and I sat on the back porch watching the stars. He put his arm around me and said, "You seem peaceful lately, more than when we first met." I am peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. He kissed my temple. I'm glad. I thought about the past few years, the betrayal, the pain, the fight to reclaim what was mine. And I thought about what I'd built from the ashes. A thriving business, a family. I chose a life that reflected my values instead of someone else's expectations. The people who tried to destroy me had thought I'd disappear quietly. They'd thought taking away their support would break me. What they hadn't realized was that I'd never needed them. I'd been carrying them all along. Loyalty isn't about staying silent when you're being betrayed. It's about being true to yourself when everyone else expects you to accept less. The people who underestimate your strength because you've been kind will learn the hardest lessons. Money and power don't define you, but knowing when to use them to protect yourself does. I learned that I was stronger than I ever knew. Strong enough to walk away from people who didn't value me. Strong enough to build something better. Strong enough to forgive eventually, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Sophie came running out to the porch, unable to sleep, asking for one more story. I scooped her up, this child who was now mine forever, and carried her back to bed. As I tucked her in, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." They thought leaving me behind meant I'd disappear. What they didn't realize was that I was never the one who needed them. They needed me. And by the time they figured that out, I had already walked away into a life they could never touch again. I stood at Sophie's bedroom door, watching her drift off to sleep, and I smiled. This life, this beautiful, chosen, hard-won life was mine. And nobody could ever take it away. Have you ever had to walk away from people you thought were family? How did you find the strength to start over? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength in the hardest moments. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they think. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you deserve people who value you, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and build something better. Wishing you strength, peace, and the courage to choose yourself.